This video is brought to you by Squarespace. From custom domains to beautiful websites using their easily customizable templates that you can have up and running in minutes, e-commerce, email and email marketing, SEO, analytics, and scheduling, Squarespace does it all and has done it for us for the last 6 years. If you are a small to mid-sized business in any industry, Squarespace is the place to go for all of your website needs. Hop over to www.squarespace.com/Hugh for a free trial. And if you like what you see and want to move forward, receive 10% off your first order by using the discount code Hugh at checkout. Thanks, Squarespace. It isn't up for debate. We are already living in the era of post-peak camera demand. Pick your source or chart, they all tell the same story. Cameras with built-in lenses, what we used to think of as point-and-shoots, have all but vanished from the scene, replaced by smartphones. You already know this. Interchangeable lens cameras, on the other hand, though also taking a hit, haven't suffered nearly as dramatic a decline. 2020 accepted, the pandemic was brutal for all categories and all industries. But pandemic or not, professionals, enthusiasts, artists, well, we need and want our tools, our companions. We don't want appliances, and we don't want to worry about answering a text message or call in the middle of a shot. The thing of it is, if we set our phones to airplane mode and shift the amount of time and money we spend on dedicated cameras and lenses to intention, imagination, pre-production planning, and other gear like lighting or audio, we can do extraordinary things with our phones, full stop. Like these two gentlemen who share their thinking in a behind-the-scenes look at filming an Apple iPhone commercial with an Apple iPhone to do this.
We were enamored with the idea of trying to create a fictional universe. In the past, we weren't able to get the look that we wanted.
Or like my friend Cliff Pickett, a professional photographer and educator who works almost exclusively with his iPhone to create photographs like this. This is not an Apple-sponsored video, though of course it is sponsored by Squarespace. Thank you, guys. Or like Claudia, who a little over 2 years ago mounted her iPhone on a first-generation Osmo Mobile gimbal. Actually, it was an Osmo Mobile 2. And with absolutely nothing else, Cliff and I were mic'd separately and I synced the audio and post, walked backwards for 40 minutes through Soho, filming my conversation with Cliff about just this subject. There is simply no way Claudia could have done this as inexpensively, unobtrusively, or comfortably, as well with a dedicated camera rig. Even an Osmo Pocket would have required a smartphone itself just to be able to frame properly, making even it a marginally bigger, more complicated, and more expensive solution. Given the dramatic escalation over these same 2 years in camera specs, prices, and now, with the development announcements of Canon's and Nikon's Mongo mirrorless integrated battery grip R3 and Z9 respectively, it's a video I think not nearly enough people have seen and should see about now. It offers in conversation and actual practice a very different perspective on where the camera industry wants to go and where we, at least the majority of us, want to go. The industry wants higher prices, understandably, and increasingly justifies those prices with complexity, and with it attendant size and weight gains, while we want simpler, lighter, smaller, less expensive, yet still performant. Which we already have, the inevitability of successive technology trajectories favoring computational imaging via small sensor lens units over much larger, call them now traditional single lens sensor combinations as we move forward. Which is not to say that whether it is an R3 or Z9 for pro sports and wildlife, a Fujifilm GFX 100 for ultimate resolution, a Sony A1 as the current state-of-the-art hybrid do-it-all, or like a SL2, M10R, Q2, or CL as a palette cleanser when we pursue our art, that there is no place for high-end dedicated cameras. But it does really make me wonder how many more years we have with any of the larger-than-smartphone sensor cameras, interchangeable lenses or not, before they, and we who use them, go the way of, I don't know, large format film cameras, fossil fuel vehicles, horse and buggy. But I do not wonder at all about the future of photography and filmmaking per se, because what has always been most important, what is most important today, what will always be most important are the people behind and in front of the cameras. So grab a cup of joe, sit back and enjoy, from the archives of Three Blind Men and an Elephant, my conversation with Cliff as the three of us wander the streets of New York before anyone had ever heard of COVID, streets that I am delighted to tell you Claudia and I are wandering once again, and where we will be holding our workshops once again this fall.
I did a trip up in the fall, up into New England as I do every year. Just my brand new full-frame Sony DSLR. And the
Sony full-frame mirrorless? Or?
Full-frame mirrorless. Okay. It was the A7R2 that came out. So excited about it. And the only thing that's better than having a brand new camera is having two brand new cameras.
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
So we kind of just took a trip up in the fall and I just shot with both, really. And I wasn't quite sure how I was going to approach this. By the time I got back, I was completely convinced. Completely convinced. I figured all the little details, all the little obstacles, and I realized I had to prove to myself before I taught anybody else. It truly is a very capable camera.
Yeah.
And then it went beyond that, and then I realized just what the experience was like to just hop in your car. I mean, imagine that. No batteries, no memory cards, no laptops, no lenses, no lens bags, and just to experience. Overall, the bigger picture truly is that we don't have to wait for that time where we take our camera bag, throw it over our shoulder, and declare, I'm a photographer right now, and I'm going to photograph. I think it comes down to just being in that state all the time and just appreciating. And the iPhone lets you do that.
I think that's exactly right. I find that today's cameras get in the way. Wow. That is a hunk of meat.
So.
Let's go in.
Hi, guys.
Now, two hands. One for this hand, one for this hand.
Mrs. Maisel. Mrs. Maisel.
Yeah?
Oh my God.
Excuse me, is this where they did Mrs. Maisel?
Yeah. Yeah, they shot a couple of scenes in here.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Jackpot. I just want a camera that represents the shortest distance between my intent and my ability to execute. And I have found again and again that the iPhone lets me do that. Now, when I say iPhone, I happen to have an Apple iPhone, but I don't mean to limit it to the iPhone. It could be an Android, you know, Google Pixel 3 or whatever it is. It's fine.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean I don't love my gear.
Oh,
I'm
absolutely.
a recovering gearaholic, but these smartphones are incredible, especially with computational imaging now.
Think about how much technology has improved. If you were going to basically design a camera of the future, what would that look like to you?
It would be sewn into my left butt cheek, I think.
I would just want to blink, right? But the shortest distance between your intuition and then a capture, that's the goal.
Yeah.
That really is a goal right there. So what is that shortage? How do you design a system that is the absolute shortest distance between those 2 points? That completely gets the capture picture taking process out of the way so that you can focus on what's really important. The moment, the light, the color, the gesture, the subject, all these things that really matter in the image. How do we get there?
You know, with that being said, there are still plenty of people who would say smartphones are toys, they're not real cameras, including people in whom I hold the highest regard.
Of course. Well, I would say that all cameras are toys.
Fair enough. But to the people who say, look, it's a super tiny sensor, and it's crap in low light, and it's really only got 2 focal lengths, and the bokeh is simulated, and it's just ugly, what would you say to that? We have to go to that ice cream place. This reminds me, we have to go to that ice cream place, okay?
The issue to me ultimately is, what's image quality? You know, so we have a fixed focal length, we have a small sensor, we have a slightly less dynamic range. All things, by the way, which we can fix through computational imaging.
The thing that most people don't understand when they get really excited about high ISO performance is that dynamic range craters very quickly.
Yeah.
And that by the time you get to 12,800, which is not the sick ISO, although coming from an era of 400 where 1200 ASA was macho, they don't understand that it's half. It's half.
Exactly.
And so 13 stops of dynamic range suddenly becomes 6 by 12,800. So I keep coming back to you. You're absolutely right. It's less and less about those things than most people are willing to acknowledge.
No, I mean, listen, you can argue all day long, whatever camera system that you want to use, I'll show you a better camera system. And if you have the best camera system around, wait 6 months. You know, there's always going to be that slippery slope there. What it really comes down to is this. You know, I studied music for a little bit. I thought I wanted to be a musician. That did not work out, by the way.
I know a dear friend who has the same backstory, Ted Forbes.
Okay.
Ted, that's for you.
Yeah, there's surprisingly a lot of them. But I was at Berkeley and we were listening to this interview of this guy, this old jazz guitarist. And during the interview, they asked him this question, what's good music? And he just sat back and he laughed and he goes, good music is anything just makes you want to do this. And he just starts tapping his foot, right? And if you think about it, it doesn't have to be any more complicated than that. And so when we talk about image quality, to me, that's really what's important to me is the actual quality of those images. You know, does it move you? Does it make you think? Does it inspire you?
You are talking about a fundamentally different notion of quality, which has to do with the substance, the content, the emotional impact of the image taken en toto.
Yeah, I think that we don't focus on that enough.
No pun intended.
Seriously,
Yeah, okay.
But absolutely true. I mean, if you think about it, the world doesn't need another well-exposed, perfectly sharp, 100 megapixel image that just bores them. We have enough pictures in the world.
You look at the cover of the Museum of Modern Art retrospective on Cartier-Bresson with the foreword by Peter Galassi, The Modern Century. The photograph on the cover is an iconic Cartier-Bresson image, and it isn't close to being sharp, and that doesn't matter at all.
You know, I'm entirely self-taught. I obsessed, just like everyone else has, believe me. I've lost so many nights wondering which lens. Is there a really big difference between a 55 and an 85? Do I need that 1.8 versus that 1.2? You know, and just looking up where the situation demands, sure. But I've lost so many nights of sleep over that, and just the experience that comes along with just not taking it as seriously and just playing with it.
So you make a number of good points, but one thing that I want to go back to is all of the lenses. Again, most people don't realize that Cartier-Bresson, who is my favorite street photographer of all time, shot with a camera using one really of only 2 focal lengths, and he didn't swap them back and forth immediately. He would just shoot with one until he wanted to shoot with another. 35 millimeter, 50 millimeter. And back in those days, I mean, if you ever look through the rangefinder portal, because they were 2 separate windows, the viewfinder and the rangefinder, it is so difficult to see. I still have the 3A. It is so difficult to see that it's no wonder all of these guys went to zone focus anyway. So you've got some of the greatest names in the history of photography shooting with a camera of a single focal length at a medium aperture with an, it wasn't even called ISO back then, an ASA of 32. Hey, back in the day, 100 was kick-ass.
Yeah.
And then people say, oh, they say smartphones aren't real cameras.
Creative limitations. You ask anybody, anyone about this, anyone who teaches workshops, any instructors, anyone who understands the industry, they'll all tell you the same thing. Through limitation, these creative limitations gives us that room to create. Otherwise, it's like having a piano with a million keys. How are you supposed to play music on that?
What a great metaphor. What a great metaphor. I find that I actually prefer shooting with primes, one prime at a time. I say to myself, okay, right now I'm shooting with a 16mm 1.4 and a crop sensor camera, 24mm full frame equivalent, and I am going to see the world with that frame until I decide I don't want to. And some of the best images I've ever captured have been like that. It's also a lot lighter, and the zooms are a pain in the butt.
Yeah, yeah, but, and you do, and you actually see it in that 35mm equivalent, or that 24, or that 50, whatever you decide that is. Otherwise, you just stand out here with just a plethora of options, and where do you even begin, right? I mean, New York City is a perfect example for that. Everything is everywhere. It's like walking into a crowded restaurant, and there's all these amazing conversations for sure, but you can't hear any of them because all you hear is everything. You need that limitation, and when you have that, the whole world opens up. Everyone shuts up, and that conversation just stands there in front of you.
You know, you just reminded me that I want ice cream. Let's go get some.
Let's do it.
Claudie, do you need to take some? Just go, 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 go. She's an Amazon.
Yeah.
She's an Amazon.
Right? The pants are gonna fall.
Joel Meyerowitz brought a Deerdorf view camera to Central Park years ago. One of the things that he liked is that you could see everything. I want to see that on something larger than an iPhone. On the other hand, I want to see this on an iPhone too.
Now think about what we have. Relatively well lit, some contrast, right? Bright spots, dark spots, nothing too crazy. No harsh shadows. There's not a big depth of field. It doesn't matter if you shoot this at 1.2 or 16. So let's talk technical for a second. How would we capture this any differently between a phone, between a medium format, between a DSLR, full frame, crop sensor? How would we capture this differently?
Well, my arms would be less tired under one scenario than the next.
Sure. Right?
But I'd frame it the exact same way.
The depth of field is the same. The resolution is going to be great. We have 12 megapixels. How long have we had professional cameras that were 12 megapixels in the industry?
12 megapixels?
Yeah.
My first hardcore digital DSLR was the Canon 1D, the original, with 4 megapixels. And I shot in 2002, shortly after I bought it, the first light memorial to 9/11. That photograph hangs on our walls to this day.
12 megapixels is plenty. If you need more, picture, 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 right? We can do 60, 70, 80 megapixel. The resolution isn't the question. We have software, we have fractaling that can upsize it 500%, 1,000%. That's actually not the issue. We have everything needed to shoot the camera, to shoot this image exactly how we need to with the phone. You know, the question all the time, do you shoot RAW, do you shoot JPEG? So the answer is neither. The JPEG format's 25 years old, right? It's 27, 28 years old now. It's archaic. This new system, the HEIC, is half the size of a JPEG, right? The new iPhones are doing something like 5 to 6 trillion operations a second. It's a 10-bit file. It can handle up to 16 bits like a TIFF. Just take a single picture, just like that.
That's exactly what I would do.
I wouldn't think about it anymore.
Yep.
That's it. If I wanted to, sure. Okay, how can I increase the resolution? Well, I can put it in portrait mode. I can turn it vertically, and now I can stitch multiple pictures. And I can stitch that in post without a problem. Panel mode, you have a few different issues with that. One, you're going to have some ghosting. You're going to have some people that are moving. Two, if it starts getting lower, lower light, the panel mode is giving you a single image, which means that it increases the shutter speed, which means it increases the ISO. What you're much better off doing is shooting individual images and stitching later. Okay, now we have, I'm going to put in a live photo. That opens up a few different opportunities. We can go in here, we can look at our photos, and with the live photo, we have movement in the frame, which just gives you a little bit different of a way of looking at it. Where if we flick up, now we can create a long exposure. If we needed to remove people from a scene, it gives us an instant long exposure that's right there. You can post it on Instagram, you can post it to Facebook, post it wherever you want. It's right there, right? And that's important, I think.
You didn't need a laptop. You didn't need a computer.
You didn't need anything. And more than that, if we're talking about a tool that's, let's face it, we're creatives, we're creating, right? That feedback loop is critical. If you remember in the film days,
They always used to have Polaroid backs. The professionals used that. They needed it. They didn't sit there and say, oh, I'm awesome, I'm nailing exposure every time.
Yeah.
I don't know of a photographer, no matter how professional, who gets the exposure right every time.
they don't. And even then they have an estimate, right? So then we get our DSLRs. We can take a picture, we chimp. We can look at the back of it, take a picture, look at the back of it. Now with the mirrorless, we can look at it in real time. But now we're at a point where we can actually go into our photos. This is the next generation, is that we can put in a live preview. Let's say we want to see what this looks like in black and white. Before we even take the picture, we can visualize what this is going to look like in a high contrast black and white.
And in fact, I love to set my viewfinder on my real cameras to black and white because it's a great aid for composition.
Yes.
If the color isn't the purpose of the photograph, I say get rid of it as you're visualizing and framing up.
Yeah, if it doesn't add to it, it takes away from it.
Yep.
Right? So having a system like this, you can take that image, you can get a live preview of it, you can snap right there, and then the best part is you can edit it right on the fly. Did I actually get that shot?
Right.
Right? You can actually edit it and
This
say,
is
yeah,
where you can do over in the moment.
You can bring it in the way I set it up. I use Lightroom, by the way. It's set up to auto add every image I take. No matter what camera system I'm using, no matter what app I'm using, I can go in here and it's going to start adding. These are just some images I brought up before.
Gotcha.
It's just going to start adding to the very top all the images I just took. Then I can go in here and I can start editing right away to see, all right, what do I want to do with it? Do I like that scene? Great. But maybe, you know what? It's a little bit askew. I can go in here to geometry.
Oh, yeah.
Turn on auto.
This
Now
is
I have perfectly
fantastic.
straight. Maybe increase the shadows a little bit, increase the whites a little bit, increase the vibrancy. And with this, probably a little bit of dehaze. It's just going to bring out a lot of that texture. It's very subtle. But now you go from an image that like, yeah, I wonder what that will look like to, you can actually realize the potential of the image while you're here. If I don't like it, I can go back in and take another photo. I'm not going to realize that later on in a week or two when I'm at my laptop in my basement.
You know what this is making me think about?
Ice cream.
Yeah. You are especially adept at the use of apps to broaden the performance of the iPhone. So can you take us through some of those, Cliff?
So basically these apps, I approach people on two different levels. One is using it as a camera, as a creative, image capture tool. But then there's also the other way about it is the apps that you can use just as a photography perspective. Figuring out where the sun's going to be, what's the weather pattern going to be like, remote triggering, scouting, a lot of different ways to scout with maps, for instance. Geotagging is another great feature. I cannot believe it's in 2019 we still have cameras that don't have GPS. Not only do you have GPS built into all the cameras, for any picture that we take, for instance, we could take these pictures. It's always going to show us, depending on what image that we're looking at, it's going to show us exactly where we took these pictures. I mean, that's really helpful for a lot of levels. But what we can do with some of these other apps is basically go in, and for geotags, for instance, it'll keep a digital breadcrumb trail of where you are, and you can just marry that up later in other software, and it'll basically tell you exactly where you took these pictures.
What a great way to track the murals and wall art that we see in Manhattan.
So many of these different things that we can use. And so I do a whole lecture just on basically how we can use this as the single most important tool for a photographer, regardless of whether or not you're actually using it as a camera or not. It is the most important tool if you know how to use it properly. But using it as a camera, so we talked about it before, some of those creative limitations, but what we didn't really talk about is all these other possibilities that come up when we have these supercomputers married to these, these camera systems. And so this computational photography, that's typically what they call it now, it opens up a lot more opportunities.
Of course.
We talk about like creativity, for instance, and depth of field is one of them. And we don't have a shallow depth of field because we're shooting with a small sensor and a fixed wide angle. Well,
yeah.
Right, it's interesting because we're finding ways to get around the physics of this is really what it's coming down to. So sure, the creative limitation is we get everything in focus, and sometimes that's a good thing, especially if you're shooting landscapes. If you're shooting portraits, for instance, it can be very different. You want a shallow depth of field. But a lot of these newer systems, the way they get around it, for instance, is where we have 2 cameras. So we take advantage of that parallax that can be created, and we create a live depth map in real time, and then we can adjust that after the fact, right? So if we do one for you, since I have you in this beautiful light right now,
Yes, of course.
we might as well take advantage of that.
There's just no way it's going to look, I'm going to look as good as when Claudia takes it.
There we go. Oh, there's our portrait right there. So now we go into this. And sure, we have everything in focus, and that's how that's how all cell phone cameras used to look. And that's what we can tell right away as a photographer, was that taken on a phone or not. But now we do have the option of going in here and just creating a much shallower depth of field, which gives us a lot of really creative potential if you think about it. Now we can get everything in focus and decide later, where do we want that focus to be? We don't have to worry about whether that eye is going to be in focus or not. We don't want to adjust it that way, but it will give us a depth map that we can adjust. Now, if we bring this into apps like Lightroom, for instance, we can actually make adjustments based upon the depth map in real time.
Interesting. I use
Very
Focus
interesting.
for that. I think that's a little more flexible than the camera app that comes with the iPhone.
But now the Lightroom app, and this is, you don't have to be an Adobe subscriber to even use their camera system.
Yay.
There's actually really important features. So one that we can shoot, if I go to our professional mode, for instance, we have the option to shoot in RAW, right? And this is one of the limitations that used to be actually, you know, a legitimate complaint, was we were shooting in JPEGs. Well, we spoke about these HEICs very briefly.
Right.
But basically, it's a wrapper that will cut all of your file size in half and also give you a much higher bit depth. So much better. You won't worry about banding. There's a lot of different...
Well, what kind of bit depth are we talking about? 10-bit, 12-bit, 14, 16?
It has the capability of going up to 16 bits.
Really?
Yeah. So basically...
That's HASI H6D territory.
Yes. Right now, we're capturing 10 bits.
Okay.
Which is better than the 8-bit that we're capturing on the JPEGs now.
Yeah.
Plus, it's wrapping in multiple images, so we can do depth capture with multiple lenses. It's wrapping in live photos, so it'll record video, audio. All this just get wrapped up in a container. So now when we talk about computational photography, we can take advantage of multiple lenses, burst images, smart HDR, all of these features combined. It gives us a lot of more creative potential.
You know, you just spouted more technical terms in a shorter period of time than I have ever done. So stop hawking me. Okay.
But the whole point of it is there is so much technology going on behind the scenes,
Right.
and the only thing that we have to do is press this button. That's it, really. I mean, if you talk about, we could even go on and on about what smart HDR is now. But essentially on these new cameras, it's taking the pictures before you even take the pictures.
I want to make a point. It was Steve Jobs who famously said, doing simple is hard. And yet here we are in 2019. Say what you will, that Apple is not the Apple that it was. There's good and bad in that. But in this regard, this technology is absolutely faithful to that principle laid down by Steve Jobs.
Oh, this is the place you're talking about.
This is the place
Okay.
we're talking about. Peanut butter cup.
Pistachio pesto.
With Cliff Pickett. See you next time. This episode was brought to you by Squarespace. For all of your website needs, Squarespace is the place to go. Hop over to www.squarespace.com/hue for a free trial. And if you like what you see and want to move forward, receive 10% off your first order by using the discount code HUE at checkout. Thanks, Squarespace. If you like what you've seen here today, please give a thumbs up, subscribe, join the conversation below, because this is an incredible audience. If you'd like a copy of our Streets of New York, the book, head over to www.3bmep.com/books. If you'd like to schedule a one-on-one video session with me for a portfolio review, explore or hone your artistic voice, select gear, and more, sign up at www.3bmep.com/booking. Finally, consider supporting our work by using our no-cost-to-you affiliate links down below, picking up some official Three Blind Men and an Elephant swag at 3bmep.threadless.com, sending coffee money via PayPal, or best of all, join us as a patron over at Patreon. However you choose to support us, as always, we thank you for it.